3,000 years ago, during the time of the pharaohs, 1,000 years before the birth of Christ, a people, the Lapita, arrived in the South Pacific, and all that remains, fragments of lives long since past.
Vanuatu no more, no more.
Vanuatu population 270,000, and the people, according to a recent lifestyle survey, the happiest in the world. Vanuatu today is a really diverse place, with over 100 local languages, a French and English colonial past, and the people here, the Ni Vanuatu, who although have been classified as Melanesian, may have much closer links to Polynesians than first thought. 300 kilometres south of the Solomons, 3 hours flight from Auckland and the centre of Melanesia today, Vanuatu was a stopover on the voyages of discovery and settlement of the Pacific by the first people, the Lapita. 20 minutes drive from Port Vila, the capital, we find the Teouma Valley and a coconut grove that may hold the answers to the big question: where did we come from? The excavation at Taouma is the most significant site in Pacific archaeology, discovering complete skeletal remains and pots of the Lapita people.
There've been more than 200 of these sites identified from island New Guinea right across the Tonga Samoa, and basically people are finding the scraps, I mean very much the scraps of what these sites once represented, and this site here at Taouma is really highlighting that.
And the greatest find, these bones, a cryptic puzzle waiting to be solved.
This period of settlement, the Lapita period, before the discovery of the site, there were only 15 individuals, people from that time, represented by these skeletons. So, of course, now we have over 30 individuals from this one site, and that gives us an opportunity to begin to understand their health. And you can see that the spine bends twice here, and this is actually the neck and the top of where the head would have sat here. So we think that this person was laying down and the top of the body is actually slumped down over the legs.
The Lapita, the first people in Vanuatu, but where they came from is complicated.
It's really a question in three parts, because, so where do the languages of the people come from? And the languages of all Polynesians, many people in island Melanesia, all the languages in Vanuatu, for instance, all come originally from Taiwan. We can trace them back to an original language that was spoken in Taiwan, maybe 4,500, 5,000 years ago. If you say, where does the Lapita culture come from? The earliest sites of the Lapita culture are found in the islands just east of New Guinea, in the Bismarck archipelago, around New Britain and New Ireland. And that's the first sort of identifiable Lapita sites, identified because they've got this pottery with this incredible designs on, which is the real kind of key to the thing. But then when you say where the people come from, and that's the third big question, and that's might have a different answer again, and we're really not too sure, but we think that this site will tell us.
The Austronesian language family, originating in Taiwan, unites the people of Oceania, island Southeast Asia, and surprisingly, Madagascar off the coast of Africa.
I am the government Tuluginer.
Today, the common language of Vanuatu is Bislama, a mix between English and Austronesian. It unifies over 100 separate languages and cultures in Vanuatu, and perhaps the Lapita were a mix of people too.
Hey! Hey! There's clearly been a mixture of people. The Lapita culture really, although it's found in the Bismarck archipelago, it's very similar to cultures that you find in island Southeast Asia. Earliest in Taiwan, found in the Philippines and eastern Indonesia. So it has its kind of roots in Southeast Asia. But if people were actually moving, physically moving from Southeast Asia into Melanesia, they were clearly intermarrying and mixing with the people who were there all along. Except one group weren't intermarrying and mixing, and we now call them the Polynesians.
There's no evidence of any major break in the archaeological record. So, you know, I don't think these populations, I don't think Lapita was sort of any strictly uniform population.
According to the fast train to Polynesia theory, Polynesians came through Melanesia from island Southeast Asia, but did not stop on their voyages of settlement. But if Lapita were the ancestors of both Melanesians and Polynesians, does the theory fit?
I think the fast train to Polynesia, there's no question. I don't know whether the train necessarily is a good analogy. I mean, I've heard a slight twisting of the fast train to Polynesia, in that there's a fast train but some carriages drop off, and so what we are certainly identifying in terms of Lapita is that from Vanuatu, New Caledonia, Fiji, Tonga, there's very, very little variation.
A lot of the research that's been done in the past is looking at, you know, concentrating on where these people came from. You know, did they come from Southeast Asia? Did they come from Papua New Guinea? But now we're actually able to understand what they actually did when they got here. You know, what sort of work they did, what their diet was like, what sorts of diseases they suffered from during life.
It's a really, really long time ago. And so what, you know, the evidence that we've got is what the material culture, and now we've got the skeletal remains of a population in Vanuatu 3,000 years ago. This doesn't mean that we can say, well, this is the Lapita. I mean, this is what all the Lapita population was. I mean, different things might have been going on in northern Vanuatu, you know, different population streams, because there's clearly a lot of movement going on at this period.
Up until now, the Lapita fragments, the only clues to a culture lost in the mists of time. At Taouma, the fragments reveal much more. The discovery of this ancient burial site here in the Teouma Valley has thrown up new questions of the origins of the people of Vanuatu. But who are these people? What do they look like? And could they be the common ancestors of both Polynesians and Melanesians?
What we've found so far is that the people are generally very robust. They've got very strong muscle markers, attachments of muscles on the bone. Particularly the men are very robust, very big and muscly. The women are a lot smaller, but still they have very strong muscle attachments, and what that tells us is that they were using these muscles repetitively. The people living in Vanuatu today are smaller and not quite as big-boned and as robust as these people.
The work at Taouma has involved the local community and careful sifting through everything found, uncovering parts of the jigsaw of the Lapita and painting a picture of the culture that once was.
We know that the Lapita culture is really a culture that bridges Polynesia and what we now call Polynesia and Melanesia. But we also know that Polynesian people and people in Melanesia look quite different. So we have a case where it seems that the culture that the present-day people develop from is a single culture, but the people themselves are quite different. You know, so you've got sort of two groups of people, one culture, and the languages too are all related. So this is the conundrum. It's really answering, perhaps, you know, why are Polynesians and Melanesians different in appearance?
Today, over 90% of Ni Vanuatu are Christian. Along with their French and English colonial past, this has affected every aspect of their lives. But Polynesia too has influenced this place.
You look at the population of Vanuatu today, some of them look quite Polynesian. Others look as though they've come out of the Solomons. And that's mixed from north to south. There's Polynesian languages here, but the people don't look remotely Polynesian. There's people that look Polynesian, but their language is not connected to Polynesia at all.
Starting about 800 AD, about 1200 years ago, you started to find that groups of Polynesians from Western Polynesia, so Samoan area in general, started moving onto small islands in Melanesia and kind of taking them over. So there are now quite a few small islands along the eastern edge of Melanesia where the people they certainly speak Polynesian languages, quite related to the language of Samoa in particular.
Mauta Village, Port Havana, a World War II American naval base and the site of Samoan missionary contact.
Hello, Talova, and welcome to my little Second World War collection. Come in. This is all Lapita. It's a pottery. It's a very old pottery, and we found them in all our old villages in the jungle, but not in this area, but in the jungle. Most of them lying around in the jungle. The history is that we came from in the Vanuatu. We came from New Guinea and Solomon and Vanuatu. The people from Vanuatu. That's the history I only can say. Vanuatu and Samoa and Tonga, almost sometimes the words nearly the same. I mean, I can say 1, 2, 3. Say dua tolu. Say dua tolu. Same as you. So
And Lima?
Lima, yes. See. So Talova is a very welcome word in Vanuatu. Talova, like you shake hands, so it means say you're welcome. See. Goodbye.
Usually in Lapita sites you find bits and pieces of pottery about this size. But here in Teouma they've managed to put together 4 complete pots. The Vanuatu National Museum will be the exhibition space for the Teouma discoveries.
This exhibit, which opens in a couple of days' time, will actually be it'll be a permanent exhibit of about the Lapita people and the Lapita culture. And the exhibit will be through these, there'll be a series of pots that were found last year and the year before out at the Teouma excavation.
After months of reconstruction at the Australian National Museum, the pots are now returning to their permanent home. Pride and curiosity filled the air. The culmination of years of hard work.
The pots are the best examples of Lapita pots ever found in Vanuatu. They're the most complete, and they're also got a variety of different kind of vessels, different kind of shapes, which must have been used for different purposes. And by having the pots in the museum, it's perhaps the best kind of artifact we can have to talk about Lapita, because everyone knows Lapita and associates them with these special pots. I mean, that's where the name comes from.
This won't happen again in our lifetimes. It's only in New Caledonia where they've found several pots, and we've got 4 here. So just to see them reconstructed and extraordinary artwork, really. I mean, and 3,000 years old.
I didn't get a chance to see the pots when they were being stuck together in Sydney, so it's pretty amazing to see them. I mean, a couple of them we saw, they were sort of complete in the ground and crushed, but they had all this kind of growth on them of sort of calcium carbonate, and so they didn't look anywhere near as nice as they look now.
A window to our past. But what else will these bones tell us?
In 1947, a primitive balsa wood raft sailed out into the Pacific. Tor Heyerdahl and the crew of the Kon-Tiki drifted from Peru to Polynesia to test Heyerdahl's theory that early Pacific peoples could have come from South America. The experiment made seafaring history.
Although Tor Heyerdahl's South American origin theory has largely been discredited, it and other theories persist. Other proposed places of origin have been North America, Japan, Taiwan and the Philippines, and even from the final frontier. Back in Auckland, oral historian and anthropologist Dr. Augustino Mahina gives us another perspective.
It's logical to say that they traveled by boats. They didn't fly, certainly. I'm pretty sure of that. There is a collective thinking amongst West Polynesians that our ancestors came from Pulotu, which is an actual island to the northwest of every inhabited island. Pulotu for Western Polynesia is Hawaii for Eastern Polynesia.
In an ancient Samoan legend, there was a great war between Pulotu in the west and Papatea in the east. Pulotu, the victors, settled Samoa, and Lu named it the Sacred Center. Lu, the bringer of the chicken.
The pig, the dog and the chicken all come from Southeast Asia. This whole agricultural kind of package spreads out of the Bismarcks through the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, New Caledonia, Fiji and onto Tonga and Samoa. And so when you look at, say, the agriculture, that's one of the new things that comes in.
Genetics today is offering another tool in Lapita research. Dr. Lisa Matatu-Smith of Auckland University is analysing the Teouma bones.
Material was sent to me from the first excavation, the first year's excavation, and we were able to process that material and find out that indeed there was DNA, because DNA degrades through time, so these being 3,000-year-old remains. And really in the Pacific, where we have the worst conditions for preservation of ancient DNA, being hot and wet conditions, we're really at the boundaries of what we can get DNA out of it 3,000 years. That was really the big question, was there going to be any DNA left in this material and in these bones? And we found that it was very degraded, but there was DNA there.
Genetics and linguistics point to island Southeast Asia, Indonesia and the Moluccas Islands as the origin point of the Polynesians. Sharing many similarities, the area, also known as the Spice Islands, has always been a significant trading point.
Certainly, I think that area of eastern Indonesia and the Moluccas is an incredibly important area. That's really where we start to see the unique Pacific biological markers, both in mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome data. And that was obviously a corridor, and a corridor of interaction both directions. It's, you know, people were moving things northwards and, you know, from the Pacific into island Southeast Asia, as well as things coming from island Southeast Asia and into the Pacific.
Polynesians seem, they fit very well into populations in, say, Southeast Asia. And so if they were in Southeast Asia and Melanesia and Polynesia, we'd just say, well, they're all the same people. But in between Southeast Asia and Polynesia is the whole of Melanesia, which is a very diverse region. And so, we have to explain, how did the Polynesians kind of jump over the top of the Melanesians to get where they ended up? Well, it seems kind of a bit unlikely.
In Vanuatu and New Caledonia, for example, there were no people here before Lapita people. So then the question comes up, where did the people here come from? And I think there was some work done by biologists who actually have said that the Lapita people were actually the ancestors of Melanesian rather than Polynesian people. So we're getting into a situation now where it's very hard to say one way or the other, and that's why we're all very interested to see this DNA evidence retrieved.
We know that the first people who reached Polynesia were people bearing the Lapita culture. We also know the first people who reached Vanuatu were people bearing the Lapita culture. So the question here would be, are the skeletons that we're finding, are they more similar to people in Polynesia today, modern-day Polynesians, or are they more similar to the inhabitants, say, of this part of the island of Efate? If they're more like Polynesians, then I think the theory would have to be that originally the first people in Vanuatu, and perhaps in some of the Solomon Islands, were more like Polynesians in appearance. So then you do get a trail from island Southeast Asia through Melanesia and into Polynesia.
The debate over the Melanesian link with Polynesia goes on, But multiple origins cannot be discounted.
It's also equally possible that people were moving down into the Pacific, for at least a few thousand years before Lapita. So we always have to remember that language, biology, and culture don't necessarily go hand in hand.
All the possibilities, all the imaginings, or whatever you like to call it, should be open for further investigation, because it is in the nature of whatever is hidden to be discovered.
In terms of archaeology, we know more about Lapita, the Lapita sites and Lapita archaeology than we do about the last 2,500 years in this part of the world. That has been the focus. I mean, Lapita in some ways is easier because it's a short period, it's very identifiable. But what happens after Lapita in a period of 2,500 years is much less studied.
This is why ancient DNA, in particular sites like Teouma, are so important, because rather than guessing what was going on based on theories of mutation rates, we have datable archaeological evidence, and we have the DNA from those people.
It's still a very complex picture, and one that I think archaeology has a lot to contribute, but at the same time is never going to be fully answered.
And the initial DNA results from the Lapita bones?
We were able to look to see whether the individuals possessed a particular mutation that we see at very high frequency in Polynesia. It's a 9-base pair mutation of 9 bases of DNA. And we found that the Taouma material, the first samples that we analyzed, did not have that mutation. So they did not look like 98% of the people we see living in Polynesia today.
Although the site here in Taouma has revealed a goldmine of clues about our past, there are still questions that remain unanswered and may always be a mystery. The significance of Taouma and the discoveries made there are steadily clarifying our connections to the Lapita and giving us a picture of how life once was in the Pacific 3,000 years ago.
The Taouma excavation is now finished, and the scientists are documenting their findings, which will be published in 2007.
What we can tell you is that they have found 60 bodies in total now, and several more amazing Lapita pots.
Well, sadly, that is our show for today.
Do join us again next week for Island Soccer.
Tofa so for.
Tofa, enjoy your weekend.
The stars to our new homebound. Tagata Pasifika, born a people proud. People of the stars to our new homebound. Tagata Pasifika, born a people proud.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.